We hear many people on the left say things like, oh, they just don't feel like it'd be moral to have kids because of all these other things going
Yeah.
on. So if we just solved those in 10 years, then we could have kids or something. Now, I don't even know if that is truly what they're believing. I'm sure some young people, unfortunately, have been somehow brainwashed into thinking they can't live their lives in any way unless they solve a problem like that. But let's say you're not someone who maybe that's your reasoning. Why do you think many people are mostly, like you said, being in your late 20s, people aren't really getting married, they're not really having kids, maybe they're doing that more in their 30s. What do you think the long-term effects of that will be, aside from kind of the birth rate problem, but maybe more of just like a cultural fabric issue in terms of relationships? Like, how does that affect dating? Because then how do people spend their time basically from college age 18 to, let's say, 32?
Right. Well, in terms of why this is happening, we see a lot of people say, oh, well, it's too expensive to have kids. And I think, honestly, it comes down to a question of priorities. We actually see in the United States, it's the inverse of what some people might expect. The less money you make, the actually more likely you are to have children. The number of children people have actually decreases as income goes up. So that is something that I always found very interesting when people say that I can't afford to have kids. And it's like, well, perhaps you can't afford to have a certain lifestyle while having kids, but the idea that the cost of children is absolutely preventative, I don't think is true, and that's not what the numbers show. And so in terms of the consequences of this, I think especially coming from a female perspective, we are starting to see women who are maybe in their later 30s or 40s speak about the fact that they didn't want to have kids when they were younger and they thought they had all the time in the world, but now when they're older, they're realizing that biologically speaking, that is not the case. And so that's something we've talked about quite a bit on my channel, and I've gotten quite a lot of angry responses for addressing it. But it's simply, a matter of fact. Women have more of a biological clock in that regard than men do. And so I think a lot of these publications that maybe come from a feminist perspective who are telling women, you don't need to worry, even think about having kids, you're too young, whatever, no need to settle down. I think they're doing women a disservice, because regardless of whether women ultimately want kids, they deserve to know the truth, that, it is simply going to be harder for them after they're 35 if they do choose to try to have a kid. And, it's a very regrettable thing seeing these pieces from these women who are now realizing that they were essentially sold a lie. And what we're also seeing is that because I think men as well are, settling down later and later, but by the time they're ready to have kids, if they're in their late 30s or 40s, women their age may not be able to have kids, so they're starting to date younger. And then that also means that men who are young, the same age as the women, they're less likely than ever to be having sexual partners or to be in the dating game. So there are all of these social consequences as a result of the breakdown of the family. And ultimately what it's leading to is people being unhappier, men are unhappier, women are unhappier, there are fewer children. A lot of problems have stemmed from this abandonment of the nuclear family.